Good morning, good morning, good morning. Friday, Stanford Gould page. I'm live, as promised. Now, I'm going to wibble for a minute or two because I think quite a few people might be jumping on. If you are jumping onto the live this morning, you're very, very welcome. I look as though I'm growing my light shade out of the top of my head. Oh well, I'm sure you're not worrying about too much about that. So if you're joining us, brilliant to have you with us. I can see the numbers starting to pop in. That's great. Pop a little blue right down there somewhere in the corner of your screen. There'll be a little blue thumbs up, looks like this. Press that to say you're here. I will attempt to name check and follow some queries and questions, but I think there might be quite a lot of bods looking and viewing and trying to get some help, so bear with me if I don't shout you, name check you or answer your question in the moment. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me by now, you're just not paying attention. I'm Heather Stanford. My business is Stanford Gould, and I'm the legal fairy godmother to the wedding industry. We hope, we try, that's what we're trying to do. We're on this morning to talk about the internet melting activities of yesterday when the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority, issued or published some guidance about COVID and consumer contracts, and all hell let loose in the wedding sector social media space about, oh my god, what does that mean, what do we do, panic. I started to sort of answer a few of the streams that I'd seen, and I thought, you know what, we need one of these. So I'm back again. I know, keep interrupting your lockdown with this mug going, this is what we need to do, and I hope it's helpful. So we got, oh my goodness me, 70 odd people. Right, that's brilliant. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This will be available on catch up later for those of you who can't join, and it will also be on our YouTube channel later when the algorithm of Facebook allows me to do it. So thank you for everybody who's joining. Can I first of all apologise to a few people who have got other lives and training sessions going on this morning. I'm really sorry, I'm clashing. I've got some that are starting at half 10, some start at 11. I will be done by the 11. I can't promise I'll be done by the half 10, but I'm conscious I've jumped in, and I think it was sort of necessary given how worried everybody was yesterday about this pronunciation, and rightly so. Okay. But as usual, there's all sorts of views out there. There's all sorts of, oh, you need to do this, oh, you need to do that. And I thought it would be helpful to try and just pull it together into something a bit more manageable, a bit more understandable, and hopefully a bit more reliable than some of the stuff out there. Now, what I would say, and I've said this many times before, I'm just a lawyer with a view. I'm not the law. I don't make the law. I don't decide on the law. I'm not a judge. I'm giving you a view about something. I can't guarantee what I'm giving you information you about. And this isn't advice. This is more about pointing you in the direction to find proper advice. So it is designed for wedding suppliers primarily, but I can see just from the names that are popping up, there are other people around. You're very welcome. But I'm aiming this at wedding people because that pronunciation yesterday from the CMA has caused real ripples, and people are frightened, and understandably so. But I just think we need to remind ourselves a little bit about what this actually entails. So let's just talk about the CMA and what it does first of all. I'm going to talk about some of the things that they flagged in their report, and then I'm hoping to move on to what the enforcement process is. Sounds horrendous, doesn't it? Got like manacled to some stocks outside where angry couples can throw rotten tomatoes at you. It's not like that. So I'm going to give you some idea about the enforcement process, and then I'm going to give you some top tips to go back and have a look at what you have got in terms of your contract terms and how you might deal with some of the queries that are going to come out of this. Because the one thing that I absolutely can guarantee is that you are going to have couples that are going to start citing this stuff at you. Sorry, I'm pointing over there because I've got the screen on with the with the guidance so that I can refer to it. So when I start pointing at stuff, that's what I'm talking about. So you are going to have couples who are going to start to rock up and go, well, the CMA says. So you're going to have to be prepared for some answers for this. That's hopefully what I'm going to give you some information about later. Excuse me. And you're going to have to find, may I use this expression, some balls, because you are going to have to deal with some of this questioning, and you're going to have answers, and you're going to have to think about justifications. Okay, right, we'll come on to if you get correspondence from the CMA later, but couples are undoubtedly going to start to cite this to you. So let's just start from the beginning. So the law that this report is referring to, consumer protection law, the law around frustration of contracts, is not new. Okay, this stuff applied to you on the 29th of April, the 1st of April. It applies. It is not new. They're not changing the rules. They are not changing the goalposts. They are giving you their view, and this is important, their view about how the law, as it currently is enacted, works. You need to remember that the CMA are a consumer protection regulator. Okay, they're coming at this from a very particular stance. They are, they're very much like, if you watch the Watchdog, Martin's Money Tips, come back to him in a minute. They are the government body that are tasked with challenging and protecting the rights of consumers. But the things that they are talking about, the legal, the laws, the regulations, the legal framework that they're talking about has always existed for the purposes of COVID-19. This is not new, okay? Their report is not law. Okay, so their report is their view about how law should be interpreted, how law should be applied. They are not a judge. They are not, they're not a piece of statute. They obviously have to be listened to because they have teeth. We'll talk about that in a bit. But this is not new, and this is not law. So all the things that they've talked about, fairness of contract, fairness of the clauses in your contract, this is not new stuff. Okay. If you are a venue watching this, you might already have had customers who have cited the CMA in challenges to your keeping deposits in cancellation situations way before COVID existed. Okay, so I have certainly advised venues who have received correspondence from couples saying, we want to cancel and you're not entitled to this massive deposit. You're not entitled to keep it. And the CMA have issued guidance and, all hell will befall you if you keep it. And I have advised couples how to respond to that challenge. And I know of venues who have successfully defended court cases from couples based on the CMA says it is and the judge has said no. Okay, so can we just contain ourselves to thinking that this is coming from a particular angle and it is not the law? Now, that said, what it talks about in terms of the fairness of contractual terms, the rights of consumers, and the operation of frustration of contracts is accurate. All those things exist. And as I've said in many Facebook Lives before, this stuff's really bloody complicated. So there's no one size fits all. If I give you a list of 5 things to do, if you do all of those 5 things, it will be simple. It isn't like that. Law is not like that. And as I said at the start, this is just one lawyer's view about something, and you ask another lawyer, they'll tell you something else. But I think it's important that you think about where this is coming from, who's giving it, why it's arisen, and that's, you only got to read the papers for the last 5 days. Was it 5 days? Yeah. Lots of, tearful couples on BBC and Good Morning Britain crying at Piers Morgan and saying, oh my God, I'm in a mess. And undoubtedly, there are people who are in a mess. And undoubtedly, there are couples who have been properly shafted by some wedding suppliers. That's true, okay? But by far the majority of wedding suppliers are bending over backwards to try and accommodate some sort of alternative, some sort of way through this. I hope in line with the sort of advice that I've been given, pick up the phone, talk to people, make sure that you are negotiating, trying to agree something that is not ideal for anybody but works. And that's still absolutely the advice. But I think that's why this guidance has been issued, and it's an emotive topic. The wedding industry is an easy industry to take a bit of a swipe at because it's seen as expensive, it's seen as luxury, and it's in the firing line. It's been in the firing line for the CMA for some considerable time. And there's a lot of chat yesterday about whether or not that's because they want to see the industry regulated and impose some additional restrictions on us as the wedding industry, or you as the wedding industry. And that may be coming. That's not what we're going to talk about this morning, okay? This is about trying to negotiate a way through. And I will stress again, the paragraph that everybody jumped over in the report talks about it, the CMA, it recognises that the vast majority of wedding suppliers are behaving sensibly, reasonably. It's an incredibly tough time for everyone. It is unprecedented. I defy anyone to show me a contract that existed let's say even pre-today, that properly deals with the output of COVID-19, because nobody knew this was going to happen and nobody prepared for it in that way. Even contracts that had a force majeure style clause in it, things beyond our control, X, Y and Z happens, those were contract terms that existed for one-offs. The sort of scenario of hurricane comes through your site or your wedding location on a weekend, and all of the weddings that weekend couldn't happen, and suppliers had to deal with that sort of, maybe one, maybe two, maybe three customers who were affected by a one-off thing. This is completely different, okay? This is, unprecedented, massive time window in which we're talking about, very, very much not in mind when any sort of force majeure clauses were constructed. In due course, it might lead to slightly different clauses, but that's not the subject of this morning. So, what are we going to do? I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't worry. And that would be stupid of me to say that, because people are worried. But I'm trying to unpack what this actually means and what you need to do in response. So let's just talk about in this description of enforcement. So I'd recommend you read the actual text of the report. Don't read all the back stuff, which is very much legally based. You'll probably die of boredom. But just read it's only a page or two of the report. It's worth reading. It does stress what I said before about wedding suppliers in the main acting reasonably and these being unprecedented times. It talks about suppliers being fair, and it talks about not allowing the current tricky situation to override consumer protections. And that's correct, that's right. It then says if suppliers and customers can't reach agreements about what they're going to do, or if a customer thinks that it's been unfairly dealt with, there are ways in which those customers can complain in a very simple online form to the CMA. Complaint to the CMA does not equal enforcement, and it does not mean they're right, you're wrong. Okay, it means you've come to a deadlock. Hopefully, because you've listened to me before, you've dealt with the vast majority of your customers. You maybe only have 2, 3, hopefully 1, who you just can't make any progress with. Okay, in that situation, they can complain. What's then going to happen? my guess is the CMA are going to get swamped by all sorts of people, because it's not just weddings, remember. Their priorities at the moment are weddings, nurseries and childcare, and holiday accommodation. Okay, they're going to get swamped by all sorts of people. How quickly they'll be able to work through that, who knows? How are they going to do that? I think it's going to be by correspondence to start with. So you might get a letter or an email from the CMA saying, we've had a complaint from Mr. and Mrs. Bloggs. What are you going to do about it? Okay, if you get that sort of complaint, you do need advice, not necessarily from me, but from someone. I would suggest getting some advice. You will need to respond. We're going to talk about what you might want to say in a minute. If they don't feel that that's an adequate response, the CMA are able to bring litigation, a claim in the court, usually a sort of test case, where they will say, this on behalf of the customer, this case, this contract is not enforceable, and they will ask a judge to make a decision about it. Now, if this gives you any comfort at all, I think it's unlikely, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that the CMA are going to do that with a claim for money under £5,000. And the reason I think that is because claims under £5,000, so claims for refunds, under that level fall into the small claims court. Not a forum to argue complex, potentially legal problems. And probably more importantly, it's a bit more legal, but that small claims court does not bind, any decisions in the court do not bind other courts. And I think if the CMA want a test case that gives people some guidance that other cases might have to follow, they are unlikely, can't promise, unlikely to do that with cases that are £5,000 or lower in value. Okay, that I think covers huge numbers of you guys currently watching this, 183 as I speak. Okay, so I'm not saying you won't have to deal with the correspondence, but I think it's highly unlikely that you'll end up in court with a CMA on the other side going, this contract is not enforceable. Okay, so let's just hold that. If you are a venue and you are charging cancellation fees above £5,000, then you have a bigger problem to worry about. Okay, and you definitely need to get advice if the CMA contact you, or indeed if a customer contacts you and starts to cite this. I would recommend getting some advice. But for the smaller operations, it doesn't mean you can ignore it. Ignoring anything from an official authority is a bad idea. Okay, but I would say that the risk of you ending up in front of a judge having to explain your contract to the CMA or indeed the judge, I think is relatively low. Okay, so let's just park that for a sec. Okay, so the CMA could take enforcement. Your couple have always had the right and still have the right to sue you if they think you are wrongly holding money, a non-refundable deposit or otherwise, for the services you've provided or not, in whichever case that might be. So it's still possible for couples to bring a small claim, and I have talked in other blogs about some top tips for trying to deal with small claims procedures and claims. I'm not dealing with that today. But those are the two sort of potential outputs of this. I think by far the main pain you're going to have about this is customers who are going to start to email you going, well, the CMA says I'm entitled to my money. And you're going to have to respond to that in some way to justify what's in your contract. And the second bit of that, not just what's in your contract, but what have you done for your money? Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you look at the CMA report, it says the position in most cases, sorry, I'm looking at the screen, so forgive me. The position in most cases is that if the contract is frustrated, that is, it cannot progress because of something that's happened, government lockdown, COVID-19. The basic position is you return the monies that have been paid to you for services that have not yet been provided. Okay, that is important. It goes on to talk about limited exceptions for full refunds, because a consumer will have already received some of the services that they were contracted to receive. Now, if you are a photographer or a venue or an on-the-day provider, that is more tricky to justify, because your deposit probably secures the date, puts that date in the diary. That's what it's there for. You may do some prep work with the couple, get to know you. Let's have a chat about what you want. Let's get some idea of the style you're looking for. But in the main, most of your services are being dealt with at the end. So if a customer challenges you about your deposit, you've got to think about what services you have provided for the money that they have paid. I have said consistently, if you are a photographer with I'm picking on photographers. I'm sorry. I'm not meaning to be. I'm not meaning to call you out, but they're an easy example. Wedding card providers might be a similar one. Florists to some extent. But if the majority of your work, caterers, is at the end of the process, you've got a bigger job to justify holding on to a non-refundable deposit in this scenario. Okay, your contract may say it. That's your starting point. Great. Then you've got to say, well, what have I done for my money? You've got to describe that. If, however, you are a stationer, a planner, someone who's designing something and planning something and organising something, and the deposit is very much about allowing you to start your work, you're in a much easier position to justify a non-refundable deposit. There will in the middle. Let's talk about venues, because they're interesting. Sorry, my phone's going. I don't know whether the connection's working. I think it is. They might have done some things, meet, greets, added you to Facebook groups, sent out welcome packs, given you freebies. All of those things are things that you can justify the non-refundable deposit for. Again, take advice. So my top tips for you guys about what you need to go back and look at given this information. Right, so 1, go read this report. Don't read the law behind it, probably won't help you. Go read the report. 2, think about what you're going to say to a customer who rocks up and says, CMA says I'm entitled to a full refund. You're going to cite the limited exceptions, and you're going to think about, probably try to list what you have done for the money that you have already had off them. If you have had more money than when you look at that list, it looks justifiable, then you are in the territory of having to pay some money back, whatever your contract says. That's the reality. I'm really sorry, you're not going to like this advice, but that's the reality. So, the typical, big headline story last week was venue charges couple £18,000 to cancel their wedding. Now, that venue may have justifiable costs and expenses which it can keep. Does it justify 18 grand? I don't know. I don't know any of the detail about that, but that's the sort of headline which has led us here. Okay, so this is what you've got to think about. What have the couple paid you for that you have delivered? And does that reconcile in any way with the money that you have had from them? If it doesn't, you're in the territory of returning some money. That's the reality. Okay. Right, so questions. Have you set out in your contract what the deposit is for? Have you evidence of jobs that you turned down because of this booking? Not massively relevant in a COVID-19 scenario because you couldn't have done any of those jobs, but good practice. Have you got that? I think it's quite helpful. Have you thought about what justification you have for the deposit sum that you have identified? I've said in past blogs and lives, up to 50% is probably justifiable, but it will depend on the delivery and what you are supplying. If you've got a deposit that's 50%, I think you need to go back and have another look at it and think about it in the light of what we've talked about. I'm not saying you have to change your contract. I'm just saying you've got to think about why that's important, why you want to keep that, what it's covering. Okay. think about what costs you have incurred in getting the customer to this point, the frustration point, the point at which you cannot deliver the... Think about what you have done as part of your contract services in that scenario, okay? And start to put together some sort of justification for that money, because you will need to, either to your customer or, and let's fingers crossed, none of you watching this are in this scenario, to the CMA if they write to you, okay? Because this is what you're going to have to do. Have a think about whether or not your contract has or needs a 14-day cooling off period to ensure that that consumer bit is right. Have clear information in your contract about cancellations and payments and non-returnable bits. It's not the one thing that's going to work, but it is an important thing. Have something in your arrangement about what you are doing with postponements, and specifically the CMA. Hopefully this makes you feel better. The CMA specifically talk about it's entirely right to offer delayed services, time changes to services, i.e. postponements. That's entirely right. What the CMA does flag is that if you're offering those sorts of options to your customer, you should be offering them a refund option as well. Now, this is quite interesting, and I'll tell you anecdotally about a customer that I spoke to last week who had, a supplier I spoke to last week who had a customer who was kicking up about cancelling. That supplier knows that that customer has postponed the wedding and has reorganised it all. They just don't want them to supply. I think they're a food operation, okay? So their couple has postponed, has not taken that food operation with them to the new date, new venue, and they want to cancel, okay? And I've given that supplier some advice about that. But if you've got that scenario where you know that this couple are not cancelling because they're not going to do the event, but they just want to get out of the arrangement, you need some evidence. You need to be able to cite that, okay? Because if we're talking about fairness in a contract, if we are talking about asking the court to decide about the fairness of something, then I think the behaviour of the parties is something that's very relevant, and is something that, whether the CMA take into account, I don't know, they should, but a judge certainly would. So if you've got a customer who's saying, I want my money back because I can't put food on my table, and the whole idea of a wedding's gone right out the window, and we might get back to that, I don't know, that might be one scenario in which those sorts of external factors beyond the contract, beyond what you've done, beyond your justification, that might be relevant consideration. But if you've got a customer who wants to cancel because they've suddenly worked out that actually what they really want to do is have somebody cheaper or different, or they just want that date and that's a date you can't do, so therefore they're saying, oh well, the contract's frustrated, then I think that is important that you document it, you evidence it, because that is a relevant consideration in deciding whether or not the outcome of you entirely refunding is a fair one, okay? Now, this is my view. I hasten and stress and add, this is my view about it. But I think if you are in that scenario where you've got someone who is just being... no. If you've got someone who's playing it on, then you need to be careful. You need to document it. You need to be articulate about what you know and keep the evidence, because this could be important later on. Okay, I can't see a situation in which a customer, having done that, rocked up to the CMA and said, "I'm outraged. I'm not getting my money back." Oh, well, actually, I've got, and you say, well, actually, the customer has got their wedding fixed for September the 4th, which they're paying somebody else, and probably have already paid someone else to deliver the service that they say they want to cancel with me. I think you've got a pretty good case there for arguing whether or not that's something that should be taken into account. In front of a judge, absolutely you would. CMA, they're not the judge, remember, they're not the judge, they're not the court. You can say no, you can say no to them, okay? If you think that it's, you know, you don't have to fold just because they rock up and say it's unfair. They're coming from a particular stance. I'm not suggesting everybody should say, bugger off CMA, we're not answering you. I'm not suggesting that, but just remember this is not a court process. It is not an independent challenge to your contractual and business setup, okay? This is an important difference. Okay, what else do we need to talk about? Now, force majeure clauses, oh my lord, this is a different live entirely, and I'm not going to deal too much with those at the moment. Suffice to say, what we do know from decided case law is that you can have a clause that says if in the intervention of a third party thing, a force majeure, and there's a great debate about whether or not that exists and what it means. And, I'm talking about the general idea of a force majeure of third-party activity which prevents the delivery of a contract, thus it becomes frustrated. What we do know is that that sort of clause can exclude your liability for any additional losses suffered as a result of a thing of which you have no control. That is case law, and historically, up until this point, that's been very much what a force majeure clause has done. It excludes liability for additional losses in the event that the contract can't be performed. Okay. What I've definitely seen in the last few weeks is more people trying to add in bits to those clauses where certain amounts of money are not refundable. In that situation, we don't pay you this. Those are the bits that are going to be challenged. Those are always going to be the bits that are going to be challenged, whether the CMA issue this guidance or not. They are going to be the bits that your customer's going to challenge. If you were in a court situation, that's what you'd have to look at. These are the bits that I can't guarantee, even if I've put them in your contract or someone else like me has put them in their contract. I can't guarantee they're enforceable. And it's not just those bits. Any contract, any lawyer cannot give you something and say, absolutely watertight. You'll never have a problem. It's just not possible. People like me would not exist if it were as simple as that. You would just go to the machine, you'd press the button, the contract would come out and off you'd go. And nobody would be able to challenge it ever again. That's not how we work, and it's not how law works. So what you're trying to do is keep the risk down, try to be fair, try to be as close to your contract as you can. You will have to stand your ground with people. There are people trying to schmooze you. Just as there are groups, I say it every time, just as there are groups for you, there are groups for consumers. And yesterday, I think it was someone in my fairy godmother group, and I can't remember his name, and I'm apologising because there's so many names that I sort of lose a bit of track. But someone sent me a page called Weddings. Let's get the wedding scammers. I think something like that. Wedding scammers. We will defeat the wedding scammers. And that was a page for brides and grooms, telling them how to challenge you guys. Okay. This stuff, this CMA stuff, will be on those pages. You will start to get emails. Yesterday evening, I had my first customer who contacted me and said, "Got my first CMA question." Okay. So you will have this. Start to think about it. Start to think about what your response is going to look like. I'll try and add some blogs maybe next week with perhaps some wording. I don't know. I haven't given myself enough time to think through what I can actually offer to people on a free basis to help them. Obviously, if you have those sorts of queries and you want to come and get some advice from me, I'm very happy to give you that advice, but there's a cost attached to that. I will try as always to give some free stuff and some paid stuff and help you where I can. I am not the only lawyer in the world. There are other lawyers, particularly around dispute, who can help you. And there are starting to be people coming onto social media who have wedding experience and legal experience. I can't vouch for any of those. I can only vouch for myself. I would say that, wouldn't I? But be careful about the advice that's out there, okay? And some of the stuff that gets bandied around as though it were gospel, it's not always gospel. So those are my musings for this morning. I'm 35 minutes in. So those who have gone off to do their 10:30, you will have gone. Thank you for sticking with me. Those who've got 11 o'clock, you've got time to go. There are loads and loads and loads of comments and questions and queries and in the feed. I will try to look at them. I can't answer them all, and I might not be able to answer many of them, but I will try and have a look through. If I think that raises something that might be relevant, or I've glossed through something that needs some clarification, I will try and put that on later. I have got appointments for much of the day, so it might be much later, like back end of the afternoon, but see how we go. Can I thank everybody? Really, thank you. A, for being on. B, for all these lovely messages that I keep getting. These lovely emails. I'm really, really appreciative. I hope it is helpful. But again, I stress this is my view. It's a view. It's a view. Okay. So stay safe. That's the most important thing. Stay professional and sensible. That's important. Try and stay calm, because oh my goodness me, this stuff panics people, as did yesterday. If anybody watched Martin's Money Tips last night, I did. I've never watched it before in my life. Sat there, watched it, waiting for, and weddings, never mentioned. That's a good thing, okay? That is a good thing. That tells me that the focus is perhaps not quite as wedding focused as we think it is. Okay, a lot of chat at the moment about holiday companies, flights, holiday cancellations, vouchers, and that's very much in that sector, not so much in ours. So maybe, it's not because it's not mentioned on Martin's. I think that's a good thing, thoroughly good thing. Okay, but stick with it. You will get this stuff. You will get this flack. It's no different than it was on the 29th of April, 2 days ago. It's no different now. Okay. It is important that you try and focus on the people who are being cooperative and helpful, and stay focused on that positivity, people, because it's that's what we all need to do. This difficult stuff will happen. That's running a business, but hopefully we'll get through it, and we might get some. Who knows? Maybe we'll get some really good guidance ultimately. Not necessarily from the CMA, but maybe there'll be changes to the law. Maybe there will be some helpful case where we can go, right, that's the answer. That's what I can put in, and that's what is justifiable and enforceable. That's not going to happen next week, but in time, that may well happen. So watch this space. Stay safe in the meantime. Good morning. I'll let you crack on with your days, whether that be busy, productive, or lockdown, sunshine. The sun's just come out here. Make the most of it, because it's going to rain later. Okay. Take care. Thank you ever so much. Lovely to see you all. Stay safe. Bye.